For many Americans, protecting their home from Medicaid estate recovery is a top priority. There are several ways to accomplish this, but is transferring the house to a disabled child one of them? Here to answer this question is Harry S. Margolis, an elder law expert from Margolis, Bloom, and DiAgostino. Harry, thank you for joining me.
Good to join Jake. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, ordinarily, a transfer of a home would deem someone pursuing nursing home care ineligible for Medicaid coverage. Does transferring it to a child on Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, circumvent this?
It does. So, as you said, since eligibility for Medicaid is based on having a really low level of assets, the system doesn't want you to give away all your assets today and then tomorrow say, hey, I'm broke, so start paying for my care. So they impose a period of ineligibility for benefits if you give away assets. And it's a complicated formula, but basically it's 5 years, often known as a 5-year look-back period. But there are some exceptions, and one of those is to transfer the home to a disabled child, or actually anything. You can transfer a home or anything else into trust for the sole benefit of the disabled child. And then you can do that, and there'll be no transfer penalty, and the home will be protected.
Gotcha. So, there are a few ways to go about the transfer. Could you describe them and provide some pros and cons for each?
So it depends a lot on the child and their disability. So depending on the child's situation, an outright transfer might be the easiest thing. But if they are incapacitated in some way, because they are disabled, especially if they're intellectually or emotionally incapacitated in a way that they shouldn't perhaps have the house in their name, you might want to use a trust. The other issue is what happens when the child dies, or what happens if the child or family want to sell the house. Because while homes are non-countable assets for Medicaid purposes, once they're sold, it's cash, and it's no longer non-countable, so that can be an issue. And when the beneficiary dies, can be a mass health or a Medicaid. They say mass health because that's what we call it in Massachusetts. There can be a Medicaid estate recovery claim against the house, and a trust can protect against either not beneficial outcome. Either the house is sold and you have cash. Well, if it's in a trust, it's protected and doesn't have to be spent down, and it's still available to the disabled child. And if if they live in the house for the rest of their lives, when they die, it may or may not be subject to estate recovery. That gets a little more complicated because sometimes if you're going to use a trust, sometimes you have to use a trust with what's called a payback provision in it, so that it puts the house subject to estate recovery anyway, but not until the child dies, and only for the child's benefits, not for the parent's benefits.
Yeah, I see. So, are there any instances in which transferring a home to a disabled child isn't the best option?
It usually is, but there are some other exceptions. For instance, there's no transfer penalty for a transfer to what's called a caretaker child. So that's a child who's lived in the house with you for at least 2 years before you went to a nursing home and provided you with care during those 2 years, so you didn't need to go to the nursing home. So delayed your entrance to the nursing home for those 2 years. And there may be reasons that you're better off transferring the house to the caretaker child rather than a child with a disability. The other issue with all these kinds of transfers, if you have several children and only some of them qualify for these exceptions, you have kind of some equity issues, why are you giving the house all to the caretaker child, or why are you giving the house all to the child with a disability when you have 4 children and those children are going to get all the benefit of the house. But sometimes there's really no other choice. It's either do that or risk losing the house for everybody.
Gotcha. And before we wrap up, did we miss anything, or is there anything we need to maybe reemphasize?
Well, I think there's always the issue of kind of when to do it, because you can do it as just part of your estate plan. So if you die and you own the house, it goes into trust for the child. And that kind of trust doesn't have to have a payback provision. You could do it also while you're healthy, So we have this 5-year look back period, but if you expect to be healthy or you have other resources that can help pay for your care for some period of the 5 years, if you do need care, you can also do a trust that's subject to the 5-year look back period, but which is but which doesn't have this payback requirement, which can also include other beneficiaries because it's going to be subject to the 5-year penalty period anyway, so you don't need the disabled child exception. So the earlier people plan and think about these issues, the better, because they might have more options.
That's some great advice, Harry. Thank you so much for joining me and answering these questions about home transfers to disabled children.
Thank you, Jake. My pleasure.